Hey everyone, Chris Lehto with Lehto Files, and today we are diving into explosive breaking story. Matthew Brown, a former Pentagon insider with top secret clearance, just went public as the whistleblower behind the Immaculate Constellation report. That's a secret UAP program, an unacknowledged special access program hidden from Congress and the public. This is huge. I already had a video publishing later today on 4 other amazing interviews, and now we have this just breaking last night. I felt I had to make a reaction video, so I'll be reacting to the final part of this jaw-dropping interview with Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp on the Weaponized podcast. So Brown lays out why he's risking everything to tell the truth. We'll also touch on how the USDI office, under folks like Gary Reed and Ronald Moultrie, tied into silencing whistleblowers like Lou Elizondo. And Brown talks about an interesting giant black triangle. It's like they were waiting for it. So buckle up. This is a wild story. Let's get into it. Chris Lehto, welcome to Lehto Files.
Episode of Weaponized.
When I was in USDI, I read the transcripts of Sean Kirkpatrick briefing Senator Rubio, Senator Warren, and Senator Gillibrand on the results of his investigation in his congressionally tasked Arrow report. I read these transcripts once and immediately knew that
Veiled threat?
No, I knew that I was now something else. I had inside knowledge into the deception of our government by elements of our intelligence community. My blood ran cold at a specific point in that transcript where Mr. Rubio is discussing the legacy program. This was a subject of direct discussion with Sean Kirkpatrick in these meetings. And based on Mr. Kirkpatrick's replies about as vague as they were, but unable to escape the truth of the legacy program, Mr. Rubio's response was, well, what the hell is the executive branch doing? Have they been running this for 60 years without congressional oversight?
Wow, just blockbuster claims. That is the teaser for part 2. So only part 1 has come out, really going into Matthew Brown's background and then the very beginning of Immaculate Constellation and how he found it. But just from that initial statement there is just unbelievable, right? Is exactly as we've been saying, is that Sean Kirkpatrick has been lying out of his Kirkpatrick pants. And you can just see here the fear and disappointment when Matthew Brown says that, yes, that's exactly when he knew, as he says, that the security state was deceiving and lying to the Congress. And he gives an example there of a transcript that he was able to read because he worked at USDI. Right, that was the same office that oversaw Lou Elizondo's ATIP program. And he says very clearly that Kirkpatrick pants said something completely not correct, as in lying to 3 sitting senators. Unbelievable. Thanks for being here. I'm Chris Lehto, retired F-16 pilot, and I can't do this without your support. So thank you for listening. There's probably all the other UFO channels giving their reactions right now. So thank you for watching this. Please hit the like button if you do like it and consider subscribing. Thanks again for being here. So first off, Matthew Brown screams credibility to me. He's not some UFO chaser. I mean, he was a policy advisor for the Office of the Secretary of Defense, and he was a technical advisor in the USDI office, working on weapons of mass destruction, among other things. So this guy had top secret special compartmental information clearance, that's top secret SCI clearance, and he saw the inner workings of the Pentagon's intelligence world. You can feel the fear in his voice as he explains he's risking his life and family's future to come forward because he thinks and believes it is the right thing to do. And I fully support him. It is. So we're all going to perish at some point. Our nations will perish. But what will we be remembered for? And I think it's integrity first. And doing the right thing does matter. And it will go down in history. I think Matthew Brown will go down in history as a hero. So that raw emotion plus his resume really makes me trust him. And here's the kicker, too. He worked in the same USDI office that went after Elizondo, led by figures like Gary Reed and Ronald Moultrie, who tried to bury whistleblowers exposing UAPs. Okay, so what was Brown's job? He was a contractor in the USDI and OUSDI, diving into all source intelligence on nukes, bioweapons, and more. And I've known many contractors who I would easily and did go to war with. I felt the same for them as I did for my military brethren. So he had access to JWICS. That's the DoD's super secret internet. It's on a separate whole network than the SIPR, but that's where he could pull live feeds from Reaper drones. He could also sift through decades of classified data. So that's how he stumbled on UAP videos and the Immaculate Constellation file. The Immaculate Constellation file was actually on a SIPR net. I think the briefing was put there by mistake. And so his role gave him visibility into the fallout from programs like ATIP, run by Elizondo, and the USDI's efforts under Reed and Moultrie to clamp down on whistleblowers. So Brown wasn't read into Immaculate Constellation, but his access led him to basically see the file. And I think that's why he can speak out now, is he wasn't read into it. What was really interesting to me is how the atmosphere inside the intelligence community just totally changed. After the 2017 New York Times story broke about ATIP, Brown says the intelligence community was buzzing. So people shared UAP data openly. He said they were positive about it. It felt like people were finally relieved that they could actually talk about this stuff for once. But he said he watched that die. He watched that effort die. So the USDI, under leaders, I would speculate, such as Gary Reed and later Ronald Moultrie, who was the leader from 2021 to 2023, I think they tightened the screws. And so mentioning David Grusch at all became a career ender in some agencies. Brown said it was a word of mouth from management that if you even mentioned David Grusch, you would be fired or removed. And so David Grusch came out in 2023. So I believe that would be under the auspice of Ronald Moultrie, right? That's when he was the leader. So Brown saw this clampdown firsthand, and it mirrors what happened to Elizondo, who faced pushback from USDI for exposing ATIP. So it's a pattern. Silence anyone who dares talk about UAPs. So listen to this clip when George Knapp asks about working at the Pentagon.
Yeah, so I mean, starting with the first part, I think for me at least, it was what I finally made it, right? I'm working at the Pentagon. It's cheesy, but I felt pride pretty much every single day that I rolled in there.
That's not cheesy.
But I look back on that time with a lot of happiness.
How do things begin to sour? Is it because of this topic that we're going to discuss?
Yes.
That's just amazing, right? And you can see why our current trust in government in the United States is the lowest it's ever been. I saw a Pew poll that it was 16%. That's how many Americans actually trust their government. And it's because of things like this, right? You have people inside the government seeing that they're lying, obviously lying. Kirkpatrick Pence lying directly to 3 sitting senators. And he knows, sitting there, and it's just going to eat away at the inside of the organization, right? The more that this information gets passed out, more people realize that, yeah, they have no integrity, right? They're lying to protect what? So Brown goes on to talk about seeing a parallel reality where secrecy serves an elite few. He says a internationalist cabal. He says it's corrupted and infested every part of society. So as a former F-16 pilot, I know what it's like to trust the system, right? You're taught integrity first, service before self, excellence, and all we do. But discovering a cover-up this big, if you guys realized I freaked out last year, it's because this really kind of breaks your whole worldview. And yeah, stings. Right? But the question is, can the government come out of it? I think it can, right? But you have to come clean. Transparency is going to be the only medicine for this. Sunlight kills all viruses, right? Does it kill all evil? So what Brown is really exposing here is he's exposing an amazing betrayal of all of our trust, right? In the name of national security, but I think it's just in the name of fear to protect their own power, I guess, future careers, agency, honor. Doesn't deserve honor, right? No one misses the KGB. I think we'd be fine without this cabal. So how did Brown find Immaculate Constellation? It was pure accident. He was sorting misfiled documents on a USDI shared server on the SIPRNet, that's a secret internet, when he opened a 2018 Schriever Wargames file. So in the interview, they say Schriever, but we always called it Schriever. I've never been to that base. Inside was a slide deck naming Immaculate Constellation as an unacknowledged special access program, and it had Lou Elizondo on the second slide. So that was set up after Lou Elizondo's 2017 ATIP leaks, and it wasn't marked classified, so Brown didn't sign an NDA for it. And I think that might be his legal shield against prosecution. But as he says in the interview, he's still facing life imprisonment or worse for going public. So why is Brown doing this? Let's check out his own words here.
Well, if it was just technology that we are worried about protecting and maintaining a military advantage, there's strong arguments to be made and have successfully been made for decades in this country that the American leadership and American people seem to be finding acceptable to be left in the dark about where science, technology, and their military is taking them. This isn't just technology. This isn't something somebody came up with in a lab and it's sensitive because once the cat's out of the bag, anybody can do it. Fundamentally, this comes from and is secondary to what we've been told is the biggest question, which is humanity alone? The answer is no. And the secrecy that has been defended is at the cost of, in my mind, human dignity, freedom, and progress. And it is no longer permissible or acceptable in my mind to continue this course, to deprive another generation of not just Americans, but humanity of their birthright to know who they are, where they came from, and what's with us.
So that is just such a hard-hitting quote. And his delivery, obviously strained, but man, this interview has so many quotes like that. He says, "We built an invisible prison around ourselves. There's still time to alter our trajectory as humanity. A damn sight better than what they have planned for." And that's why he's speaking out. And that's why I can't believe more people haven't spoken out up until now. And maybe they have, and they've just been silenced by this invisible prison, as he calls it. So Brown's fighting for our right to know that we're not alone. He says it very clearly. I think at this point, it's pretty obvious we're not alone in the universe with trillions and trillions of galaxies. If you think about that, we're definitely not alone. I think it'd be pretty arrogant to assume we are the only life forms in this place. We have knowledge, really intricate knowledge of one planetary system, and it has life, right? And we assume that the other billions and trillions of planetary systems don't have any life. So I think it is our right to know that we're not alone, and it's ridiculous that we're kept in the dark. So he's risking everything because he believes humanity's future hangs in the balance. He says there's still time to alter our trajectory, a damn sight better than what they have planned for us. Question is, who is they? And so the blockbuster information coming in the next part is Brown read a classified transcript of Arrow's Sean Kirkpatrick briefing Senators Rubio, Warren, and Gillibrand. Rubio asked about a legacy program, a 60-year UAP cover-up with no congressional oversight. And so Rubio snapped, "What the hell is the executive branch doing?" Brown says his blood ran cold, knowing at that moment that the government was lying and keeping the Congress and the people in the dark. So personally, I think we need to subpoena Kirkpatrick Pants. Why did he lie to Rubio? Ask him under oath. See what he says in public under oath, like David Grusch has done, and Lou Elizondo and the other whistleblowers. This shows the USDI secrecy under folks like Moultrie likely goes all the way to the top.
So what do you mean if you mention certain whistleblowers? Who? Who?
David Grusch.
You can't mention David Grusch in certain professional settings or you are fucked.
Yeah, if you're not fired, you are in for a very rough time, is my understanding.
Elizondo?
You know, I didn't hear Elizondo as a no-go word.
Saying David Grusch testified in open Congress, so that makes sense. So, what have you seen it happen? Have you seen people like mention his name? How do you become aware you can't even talk about him?
So that specific example, heard from a friend at that agency, that was essentially the word of mouth from management. Nothing written in paper, nothing in emails.
Mm-hmm.
But from what it sounds like, people got a conversation with their leadership and were told as much as we've just gone over. And his name was absolutely, in the first-hand experience, sort of radioactive in the chat rooms. It would either, all of a sudden, these people that never participate are there really slamming him and slamming the people talking about him.
On the classified internet.
Indeed.
Our space is one we've talked about a bunch, but these where people had open dialogue, it just got to clamp down. And his name was part of that. That's what you meant when you said certain people are radioactive. You can't mention their names.
Right.
Okay.
Clueless.
And good. Yeah. We're nuclear. He's radioactive.
Okay, so David Grusch came out in June of 2023, and he went on Ross Coulthard's show, right? Did the interview with Ross Coulthard, and then a month later, he was in the hearings, right? If you remember those hearings, I was actually there. And so I'm wondering, will the same thing happen now? If we have Matthew Brown going public with journalists, will he in 2 weeks be at the May 13th hearing? That would be remarkable.
Okay. With different designation. Yeah.
So you're seeing these videos and some limited discussion. You can't really openly talk about it, but you're curious. You're kind of hooked on the topic.
Yeah, and to be clear, 2018, when this first exposure happened, and for about a few years after, it did at least feel more open. Looking back on it, this was probably a counterintelligence prerogative at the time. But it was allowed to exist. The discussion was allowed to exist, and it felt more like, people were excited to finally actually be able to talk about this and finally be able to try to compare notes, figure it out.
Well, it's when the UAP task force was created. They didn't call it that, but it was up and running, and they were trying to make entreaties out to the intelligence community and DOD. Hey, they wanted input from and partners.
Yeah, so I saw that emerge and I saw it die.
So we saw that emerge in 2018, and it was positive atmosphere. And then he saw it die. So I'd be curious to see exactly when that happened, because Ron Moultrie took over in 2021 and David Grusch didn't go public till mid-2023. So his name was toxic radioactive after David Grusch came out. So towards the end of 2023. And that could be when Kirkpatrick took over Arrow, and maybe whoever was directing Kirkpatrick to say all these things or possibly to lie was also directing the members in USTI, right? The leadership there.
Exposure, we're going to get into this, but you mean it technically it's called spillage. It's when you see something that is of a compartmentalized or nature that you are not specifically cleared to see, and you were exposed to something, and it was like, holy shit, what is this? And the first thoughts of that I'm interested in. So if we're at that point, okay, so let's talk about that. Look, the whole world knows about IMCON, Immaculate Constellation. We're saying that word out loud. At one time, that was very dangerous to say out loud, to write, to text. We should talk about that. But before, this is your gateway. This is the entrance point. What happened? How did it happen? What did you see? What did you think?
Okay. First, I'll say is the names of these programs are super classified, right? You're not going to say the names of any unacknowledged SAP. Unacknowledged means you don't acknowledge it, right? It's a covert black program, and we've had these in the past. So the Blackbird, that was an unacknowledged SAP program. The B2 was a USAP. The Nighthawk was a USAP. So these are programs you're not going to admit. They're not on the books. So it's an unacknowledged. And we have other programs that are acknowledged special access programs. So I think like ATIP was an acknowledged special access program, meaning you can't talk about it. It's obviously super secret, but it's not unacknowledged, not fully black. They reserve that for the super secret programs, right?
Yeah, so the first exposure, or the exposure to Immaculate Constellation happened on a shared server that was shared by all the offices in OSD. What I was doing at the time was opening files that were clearly misfiled and either sorting them to our office's, part of that server, or putting them in their own box to be sorted by other responsible jobs. I mean, this is more like volunteer duty, but yes.
So because you're a workaholic and you're curious and you read a lot, you come across a file that really is what leads us to being here today. It's the Schriever file.
Yeah, so it was labeled 2018 Schriever War Game. Might have been brief or something else, but that's it. There's nothing about that screams, it's a very interesting thing. In fact, usually a lot of war game briefs are pretty boring. So there's nothing that.
So I think it's called Schriever. I don't know. Maybe if you only read it, then you call it Schriever. But anyway, that is I believe it's a Space Force base. And so to do war games, they do war games all the time. But to have a unclassified brief in there saying it's a USAP is really interesting to me. And I don't know, this may be the biggest point of contention, right? Is how is that on a SIPRnet, right? If anything is unacknowledged, or I think any SAP has to be on JWICs. So you're not going to be transmitting that on SIPRnet. SIPRnet goes everywhere. JWICs has its own separate fiber and everything, right? So you can tell if people are tapping in.
Accidental exposure for you.
100%.
You go into it, and what do you see?
There's just a generic title slide. There's a banner without classification markings that just says Immaculate Constellation. And it has a placeholder slide that shows like the Schriever Air Base logo and some logos of the units involved. But at that time, I believe it would have still been like Air Force Space Command adjacent.
Okay, so Schriever Air Force Base, now Schriever Space Force Base, was established as a U.S. Space Force base in 2019, and it's in Colorado Springs, Colorado. So that's where NORAD is located. So it's a key hub for U.S. space operations, and it's primarily managed by the U.S. Space Force's Space Operations Command. So they're known for hosting war game series, but in 2018, the actual Schriever War Game 2018 was hosted at Maxwell Air Force Base in Alabama. That's the headquarters of Air Force and Space Force education, right? That's where we all go for our military education. And that war game was set in the year 2028, focused on a global scenario with emphasis on the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command area of responsibility. So I'm guessing against China, essentially.
So still nothing particularly stunning. I think the name at the top, probably just the name of the exercise. So the next slide, though, is where it gets interesting, because the face of Lou Elizondo is on that next slide. And I was not who I was expecting to see. And it was accompanied by text to summarize. Please have some grace with me. It's been 7 years, but it was saying that Immaculate Constellation is an unacknowledged special access program established after the exposure of ATIP in 2017 by former USDI officer Lou Elizondo. And that's the gist of that first slide. And so I'm looking at that, and nothing particularly convincing that that's alien related or what the SAP is or what it's doing. So I don't know what to make of this. So I read the whole thing, and it got very interesting very quick.
So it's designated a SAP. This is a SAP. It's sitting on a server. Maybe it shouldn't be on.
Correct.
Right. So I think that's important. And also, it seems like it's just a response to the public spillage or exposure that we saw come forward with people like, and specifically Lou Elizondo. This was like an internal classified response to the fact, oh shit, some of this is out now.
Yeah, that's exactly the tone of those words, of that slide. Mm-hmm. That's the implied order of events that led to being established.
So it was like 2018, maybe.
Yeah, the file was at least last accessed in 2018. I can't remember if it did say, the file creation date, or if I looked it up, but I know it was last accessed.
And you see who's accessed it prior to you?
I can.
And what did you see?
So everyone says that I'm wrong and it's impossible, but the name I recall and recalled at the time thinking, oh, that's odd, was
Name redacted.
And did you know who that was?
vaguely. At that time, people are considered superstars in leadership circles, so you just hear names like that, and that's what her name was.
Why would that be impossible? Why are people now in retrospect, why are people telling you that would be impossible?
Oh, she wasn't at the Pentagon then.
Mm-hmm.
Where was she? She was at the Pentagon, to my knowledge, but they're saying she wasn't there.
Right.
Interesting.
So, all right.
Okay, so didn't give a name there, but he said she. I mean, the only she I know in defense circles is Susan Gough, right? And Gough's role was as the DoD's UAP spokesperson since 2019. That ties her to the secrecy Brown describes. There's a lot of ex-posts accusing her of manipulating UAP information and lying about ATIP OSAP. She's the one that came out, I believe, initially and said that Lou Elizondo didn't work at ATIP. Gough was named in Lou Elizondo's 2021 DoD IG complaint for providing inaccurate statements about his ATIP role, allegedly coached by Gary Reed. So this ties her to the USDI's efforts to suppress UAP whistleblowers, which Brown's Immaculate Constellation file basically exposed, right? As they just said there, exposed by Lou Elizondo on the second slide. Quite interesting. Also, reasons it might not be her is she focused on public affairs. So she wasn't like an intelligence operative. So it's typically these sort of files only accessed by intelligence professionals, not like media personnel. So her PSYOP background might have given her clearance, but it's unclear if she'd have reason to access such a file. Also, her documented Pentagon statements start in 2019. So that suggests she may not have been in a position to access classified USDI servers in 2018, but that could also mean it was impossible because she wasn't working there. So how could she have access? So the redaction of the name does suggest high sensitivity, possibly someone more directly tied to UAP programs than Gough. I don't know. What do you guys think? Who could that be? Let me know in the comments what you think.
So Schriever War Games, you keep reading. There's a big slide with Lou Elizondo's face on it. What comes next? I mean, you get a sense that I shouldn't be able to read this here.
No, not yet, actually. To be clear, at that point in time, I had no formal training in what SAPs were. There was no SAP marking on this. Just
He had no formal training on what SAPs were. He's just going through doing the housekeeping.
a name, Immaculate Constellation. The opening slide, just we would call it improperly labeled, improperly classified.
What was it? What did it show?
So the next slide, the third slide about, just jumps straight into the mission of the SAP and showing what apparently the results of that mission are. And it's a collection incident in the Pacific Ocean. The subject of collection is several Russian naval intelligence vessels in the middle of the ocean at night. And above those vessels is a large black triangle floating in the air. This is a still image, but it is color.
Okay, so that's the first kind of event, but what was the mission? What was the mission? That's what people want to know, is what was the mission of Immaculate Constellation as described in the product?
So in the product itself, you had to piece together the mission by reading the whole thing and kind of putting together the parts. It never spelled out fully, like as it should, the mission of the SAP. And I assume that's because this is a type of brief where there will be inserts to the deck, which would be inserted by the SAP control officer during the briefing that would provide another level of detail.
So that does make me think you do have some briefings, right, where you can take out the actual higher classified information, right? I've had briefings before where the briefing would be unclassified, and then you would just verbally say, here is the secret information, so that if you're in a secret room, right, you can carry around your unclassified briefing as a guide, but then you talk to the secret, or you could even do different things, right? You could have a secret brief and then talk to a top secret, or potentially you could have a secret brief, like possibly this could be, and then talk to the actual elements of it that are SAP related.
But based on the information included in there and its description, the mission becomes apparent, and that is a bare minimum. It's the intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance mission of a global nature for UAPs and RVs, ARVs. The hesitation there is some time has passed. One of those acronyms is in there, either RV or ARV, and that is how the triangle in this case was labeled.
Been 7 years. So as you're reading through this and that you're remembering RV or ARV just for our audience. So RV is, reverse
reproduction
vehicle.
Yeah.
And the ARV would mean anomalous reproduction.
We see, people in the literature say alien reproduction vehicle. It could just be anomalous, advanced. It could be anything that can go after A.
So you don't know what that is.
So ARV, interesting there, he says that in the report, the black triangle is labeled as an ARV, so an alien reproduction vehicle or a reproduction vehicle. And we've heard these claims for years, right? Stephen Greer's been talking about alien reproduction vehicles that are out there. If you look at what Mike Herrera, his Indonesian event, that's basically sounds like a alien or anomalous reproduction vehicle, some sort of reproduction vehicle. So very interesting. This is actually a intercept, right? Where Russian, it sounds like surveillance vehicles, he says, are waiting out in the ocean. And this black triangle basically appears and it's labeled as a reproduction vehicle. Think of that.
But I don't. This is a pretty interesting image here.
It is. And then the text that accompanies it describes the incident.
And what can you tell us about it?
The summary of that is just how it unfolded. I should actually back up and say the image itself was unique. This isn't by a plane or a satellite. It looks to be a image pretty close to the waterline. So something that to me read is we have a clandestine submersible asset close by this fleet, and it's taking pictures, trying to stay unnoticed. And so, yes, in the description, it basically lays out what occurred that night, which was that our collection assets were there in area monitoring Russian naval vessels. Not sure what they're doing there, but they've been hanging out in the middle of the ocean in this place apparently for a few days. Keep an eye on them. And this night, while they are observing the Russian vessels, a large black triangle materializes or decloaks or something. The point is it did not move. It appeared directly above these ships, probably no more than 200 meters, pretty close. And interestingly, as noted in the report itself, there was no visible reaction from these vessels from what would almost certainly be considered a hostile approach.
What do you take away from that? They didn't notice it, or they're not upset about it, or they don't know what to do with it, or what?
So the implication also in the text describing it was, the analysis in the text was that the Russian Navy had foreknowledge that this vehicle would appear in that area of the ocean, and they were there specifically to either collect on it themselves or to interact with it in some way.
So that's just amazing. So you have these surveillance ships out there, and they are just waiting out in the middle of the ocean for days, right? So they're in that location, and miraculously, this giant black triangle, sounds like a TR-3B, right? People have been saying for years, just materializes out of nowhere, right? Or decloaks, whatever he says, materializes, appears, and they don't react. So the text says that they were waiting for it. They knew this was going to happen. And so to go right underneath it is just amazing. How would the Russians know this was going to happen? Did they communicate with this craft? Is it their craft? Is it their machine? Because David Grusch did say that there is a Cold War going on behind the scenes, and Russia, US, and China are all involved. And so is this part of that Cold War ops going on, and we're just left in the dark? So Brown says it's a global program, as you heard there. So Immaculate Constellation, made in 2018 with Lou Elizondo's face on it, talking about the exposure to ATIP. Remember, this is in USDI. And now, as Brown says, it's a internationalist cabal, it sounds like. So this is all the conspiracy theories everyone's been saying. This is what like Dr. Stephen Greer's been talking about for years, and everyone says he's insane, right? Alien reproduction vehicles, giant black triangles. You have Russian waiting out in the ocean. I mean, it's just unbelievable. And Brown says he's risking life imprisonment or execution. And he says, I'm giving up the future I made for myself. He tried legal channels, working with Congress, but the system, including USDI's Reed and it possibly Moultrie, blocked him. So going public is his shield, I think. So like David Grusch before his 2023 testimony. But with UAP hearings set for May 13th, 2025, Brown could testify, especially with lawmakers like Nancy Mace pushing hard. So I think Brown could actually finally blow the lid off this thing, or at least makes a serious dent in it. But personally, I'm just so excited, man. There's just so much information coming out. I can barely keep up. I think Matthew Brown is a hero. We have several other heroes exposing a USDI machine. It was initially led by Gary Reed. I believe Ronald Moultrie is probably going to be found complicit in this, that silenced whistleblowers like Elizondo. Brown found UAP evidence in a random Schriever war game file, revealing a secret program in a government that he says is obviously lying to us. And that's really when he soured on the whole thing, right? Working at the Pentagon, soured on, it sounds like, his country. And I agree. 16% of Americans don't trust their government. And you can say clearly why, because they are gaslighting us, it sounds like. So amazing news. Go check out the actual podcast, link in the description. Part 2 is coming out this week, and I believe part 3 will be soon after. So share this video. Can't let this die. Talk about Immaculate Constellation with your friends and family, although they would probably think you're crazy. At least talk on X and demand transparency. Big question, right? Are we alone? Brown says no. We've heard that from many other people. Carl Nell, Louis Elizondo. I've heard it from so many at this point. I think we can pretty much say confidently that we are not alone in the universe. And if they haven't destroyed us yet, then I don't think we really have anything to fear as long as we don't destroy ourselves, it sounds like. So Brown's risking his life to prove it. Thanks so much to Matthew Brown. I think you're a hero. Thanks to Alex Wiggins. Thanks to Ben, the recent anonymous whistleblower that helps as well. Thanks to Harold Malgrim and Dr. Pipa, all the people who are pushing for disclosure. Lou Elizondo, even Lester Nare. So many people I've had on the show. So we're going to keep at it. We're only going to fail if we quit. And, we're not going to quit. So hit subscribe if you want to stay up to date. If you want to support my work, I really appreciate it. Go to patreon.com/Chris Lehto or become a YouTube member. Like you see all these fine people. Couldn't do it really without your support. Will Brown testify? Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Come to the Lehto Files Discord to continue the conversation and check out our sister channel, UAP Society. Have a great rest of your day. Exciting times, man. Get up for it. Peace.